I don't know about you, but have you ever gone out with someone who's extremely careful with money? Not cheap, not stingy, just intensely intentional about every single dollar. And then they do something that makes the entire table go quiet. Like asking the waiter for tap water and a napkin instead of ordering a $4 side salad. Or pulling out a calculator at brunch to divide a $23 bill down to the exact cent. Maybe even jokingly calculating who sat closer to the heater and therefore used more warmth. And you're just sitting there thinking, how does this person make six figures? That question made me reflect on something deeper, on how I personally respond to money. So today, we're going to unpack the psychology behind this behavior. And here's the surprising part. That often has very little to do with the money itself. Financial psychologist Brad Klontz studies what he calls money scripts. These are unconscious beliefs about money that get programmed into us early in life, long before we fully understand what money even is. People who are extremely cautious with spending often develop what's known as a money vigilance script. At its core, it carries one quiet belief. A financial disaster is always just around the corner. It's as if their brain has a built-in alarm system, and that alarm activates at the smallest hint of spending, even when the expense is harmless. Research suggests this mindset usually comes from one of two places. Either they grew up watching their parents struggle and stress about finances in ways that left emotional scars, or they experienced their own financial shock, bankruptcy, debt, seeing a family business collapse. When something like that happens, your brain quietly writes one rule in permanent ink: never again. And then it installs a surveillance system to prevent future threats. But here's where it gets complicated. Extreme frugality isn't always born from scarcity. Some of the most penny-conscious people actually grew up with money. That sounds contradictory at first, until you realize their parents were likely extremely frugal too. So they inherited the anxiety without ever facing the original crisis. It's almost like developing trauma from a war you never fought. Your body carries financial tension even though your personal experience doesn't justify it, because your nervous system doesn't operate on logic. It only registers one thing: spending feels unsafe, even if you can't clearly explain why. So you reuse plastic bags until they're barely holding together. You drive 11 miles to save 9 cents per gallon while burning $3 worth of fuel just to get there. The numbers may not add up, but psychologically, it makes perfect sense. There's another category of extreme savers, and their motivation is different. For them, intense frugality becomes a way to regain control in a world that feels unstable. Researcher Sarah Newcomb from Morningstar has studied financial behavior extensively. She found that when people feel their lives slipping out of control, they grip tightly to the one area they can control: money. If you can't influence job security, your relationships, or whether your landlord decides to sell the building, you can at least decide whether you buy the name brand or the generic version. Aluminum foil. Sometimes, having just one small corner of your life where you set the rules matters more than the 70 cents you actually save. That's why you'll see people being oddly selective about what they economize on. They'll refuse to pay for parking, but spend $2,000 on a rare vinyl record without hesitation. They'll cut coupons for dish soap, then sign a lease for a luxury car. The inconsistency isn't random. It's psychological. They restrict spending in areas that give them a sense of control, and they spend freely in places that satisfy a different emotional craving. Now here's something interesting. Psychologists have discovered that there's actually a sweet spot in money management. People who spend thoughtfully and save consistently but not obsessively, tend to report higher levels of security and overall satisfaction. In other words, moderate financial discipline can improve mental well-being. The problem? Most people struggle to stay in that middle zone. They either never reach it, or they overshoot it entirely. They end up eating instant noodles by candlelight to cut electricity costs while sitting on a perfectly healthy retirement account. The boundary between responsible and psychologically unhealthy is thinner than most people realize. And here's the part that might really twist your thinking. Extreme saving and extreme spending are often driven by the same core anxiety. They're simply different coping strategies. The spender looks for emotional relief through purchases. The saver tries to construct a fortress of safety, a financial castle meant to guard against vague, unnamed disasters. Different methods, same underlying fear. But we also need to talk about the social cost, because chronic penny pinching can quietly isolate someone. When you're always declining invitations because everything costs too much, or you radiate visible discomfort at every group outing, it starts to feel less like happy hour and more like a hostage negotiation. Eventually, people stop inviting you. Then loneliness sets in. Loneliness increases anxiety, and anxiety makes you cling to your money even harder. It becomes a feedback loop, designed by your brain to protect you from a threat that barely exists. Money is also one of the leading causes of conflict in relationships. When one partner is extremely budget-conscious and the other operates with a completely different financial style, tension is almost guaranteed. To the thrifty partner, their significant other's spending feels reckless, unsettling, stressful. To the other person, constant penny pinching feels restrictive, controlling, joyless. Neither side is necessarily wrong. They're simply running different money scripts on autopilot. And here's the paradox. Many people who are tightly wound about spending actually have the financial capacity to be generous. But psychologically, they can't access it. They might have substantial savings while a close friend is struggling financially, and they genuinely want to help. But the idea of giving money away sparks such intense internal anxiety that they freeze. So they don't help. And afterward, they feel guilty, which only adds another layer to the psychological complexity. Therapists who specialize in financial behaviors often point out something important. Compulsive saving can become just as disruptive as compulsive spending, especially when it begins to reduce quality of life. The moment your habits damage your relationships or block you from experiencing joy, you may have crossed a line. A line between being financially responsible and entering territory where professional support could actually help. And here's what fascinates me most. People who obsessively save are doing it for one reason. They want to feel safe. That's the entire goal. But the irony? Extreme restriction often produces the exact opposite of security. You become so preoccupied with hypothetical future disasters that you stop fully living in the present. You end up trapped in a permanent scarcity mindset, even when real scarcity is no longer part of your reality. Your bank account shows stability. Your nervous system disagrees. At its core, this behavior is rarely about money itself. It's about control, about the need for safety, about managing anxiety, about inherited patterns, about old emotional imprints that once made sense, but have since hardened into habits that may no longer serve you. What makes this especially tricky is that thriftiness is socially praised. Unlike other financial extremes, careful spending is often rewarded. People admire it. They validate it. which means chronic savers rarely receive feedback that encourages deeper self-reflection. If this made you slightly uncomfortable about your own relationship with money, good. That discomfort means something just clicked. If you want more conversations like this, more psychological deep dives, subscribe. And if you're feeling generous, which is ironic given today's topic, consider supporting the channel by joining. I genuinely appreciate it. More videos like this are coming. Same energy, new intriguing questions. I'll see you there.